Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Owen Vaughan, and today I'm joined with Dr. Chloe Tartan, a tech sustainability lead at Accenture and a former nChain colleague of mine. Hello, Chloe.
Hello. Hi.
And Dr. Annie Tubadji, assistant professor at Swansea University. Hello, Annie.
Hello.
Hi. And we're here to talk about a common interest in the role that blockchain can play in improving welfare and digital inclusivity at a regional level, and in particular to discuss a paper that Chloe recently wrote and was published, titled The Blockchain-Based Distribution Wealth Model for Digital Inclusivity. The paper was published in a journal called Region, which is the journal of the European Regional Science Association, which is co-edited by Annie. Chloe, could you take us through the key issues you were trying to address in the paper?
So obviously after the pandemic, I think it became quite clear the importance of digital inclusion policies. You know, we saw schooling going off online, lots of issues around having data accessibility, access to hardware. And so digital inclusion is most often seen with elderly populations, people who aren't maybe tech savvy, or certain socio-economic backgrounds. So the idea was that how could technologies like blockchain help to solve the issue that emerged from technology? It's inspired by Bitcoin in the sense that the network itself, it uses economic incentives to encourage cooperation, but also competition. So in the paper, we try to incentivize inclusion at the local level by, say, an example of this is running a bingo night and bringing in a certain vulnerable group, such as the elderly community, to enhance their digital skills, to focus on their digital inclusion. And as a result, create incentives for the local community, for those that are included, to support those that are likely to be in a high-risk group and might be excluded.
Mm-hmm. So the example you give just now and talk about in the paper, in terms of digital welfare, you identify a portion of the population, or maybe in a certain region, that is at risk of being excluded. And you mentioned bingo because I assume it's an elderly population and maybe they're at more risk. Is that right?
Exactly, yeah. Exactly. So the idea is to be able to track the status of citizens, which is really difficult to do at the moment, especially for those individuals that are not digitally included. So how can you identify, using digital systems, whether someone is digitally included? The best way to really do this is to mobilize those communities that are already part of, in some sense, are digitally included, and to encourage them to reach out to these vulnerable groups and to support them. And ways to do this is to incentivize them in various ways. And then gathering the data from that interaction, storing that in a welfare platform, and having that data logged in something that brings transparency, like the blockchain technology, to distribute the information around welfare status transparently and securely.
So it sounds like there's kind of two aspects you're using the blockchain. One is to record data and make sure everyone can see it in a single transparent layer, but also being inspired by the incentive mechanism of Bitcoin. Annie, I mean, perhaps we could then talk about the impact of the paper within the wider context. So this was published in a special edition of the Region journal. So could you tell us about this special edition?
Region is the journal of the Regional Science Association in Europe. It's dealing with helping local communities and governments to become as efficient as possible for helping the world become a better place. And the main idea that I'm in specific dealing with is how can we take any kind of problem and find a solution that has been overlooked because it has been boxed into cultural prejudices. So Chloe's paper shows how using the blockchain, you can address the social welfare problem, and you can achieve immense successes in two ways. First, you can boost the inclusivity. So certain groups that have been previously excluded can be now addressed by targeted approach of those who are building up the blockchain system. And then the even more spectacular aspect of it is an old problem that regional economics has been trying to promote, and the public choice people have been trying to promote, how to reduce the costs the bigger the system, the more economic costs there is for finding a social welfare idea that will fit everybody and that will be inclusive for everybody and really optimal for everybody. So where the costs come from? The costs come from the uncertainty about the world and from the size of the world. And blockchain is a fantastic way to reduce both types of costs.
So is the idea that there may be two different regions, one with a certain need in terms of welfare and the other with the resources to match that, and the blockchain is a way for someone to easily be able to search what's available?
To identify these, to know how the other player can be trusted, one of the main sources of costs and uncertainty, why people will not be willing to, trade with other people or to make cooperation with other people in a big system, is that they don't know how they behave. And blockchain actually makes this transparent, right? So this is a huge decrease of the decision-making cost. And it helps the government save on many steps that previously had to be maintained. Many of the existing silos, political little silos here and there, will be now very much disempowered, and people will directly have access to the welfare if the system is actually implemented.
Mm-hmm. So does this, in some sense, validate the use of blockchain for a positive social impact?
It's the first step towards eventually validating this, because it's a fantastic idea that has to be invested in, has to be implemented, because what culture-based development is doing, it's a heavily evidence-based, meaning empirical-based approach. If the impact that is found out to be there on social welfare is positive, we will have unpacked and unboxed the blockchain with evidence from the social prejudice and demonstrated it has an actual positive impact on social welfare.
Well, it seems like we're breaking new ground here, that this is really the first time people are thinking about this. And in the paper, you describe a conceptual model of welfare distribution. I'm wondering if you can go into, at a high level, what does that architecture look like?
So the paper itself is designed on a welfare platform, which is run by the government. As we see now, we have legacy systems, but instead in the paper we assume that we have a centralized platform where we can store welfare data. So any citizen data would be stored there, and then we have the use of blockchain technology to log audits of the data. So how can we effectively, every time information is blocked into the welfare platform, to be able to put a log of this data, we're removing any personally identifiable information onto the blockchain.
And it sounds like you're taking some care to ensure that personal data doesn't get put on a public blockchain itself.
Exactly. So in this paper, we're looking at the blockchain as an auditing tool. So that what we mean by that is to only store effectively a fingerprint of the information that we have in a centralized closed system that is run by the government as it is today, but to be able to indicate every time there's a change of information, there is a input to the system, to be able to say there has been this modification, there has been this edit, there has been this flow of money, there's been this change in the status of an individual. The idea is to be able to bring enough information across to then support those that are at high risk.
I'm quite curious in how this fits into the wider context of ESG, so environmental, social and corporate governance. We've talked a lot today about welfare, digital inclusion and blockchain, and how does this form part of that wider context?
Well, I'd have to agree with Annie that I think blockchain technology, from what I've seen, it divides people. It's not yet demonstrated its utility and the impact that it can have as a technology in society. And I think that's because the primary use case we see is as blockchain and cryptocurrency. It is a lot more than that. And I hope that the paper is one demonstration of using this technology in a way that has a direct positive impact for society, for social welfare. And social welfare and digital welfare are deeply interlinked. Our lives are, more and more governed by technologies as time goes on. So it's important that we show how technology itself can be used to support society.
And I understand in the topic of AI that in terms of welfare decisions, AI is often used. And again, it sometimes calls into question, why was that decision made? And auditability and explainability of AI. And I wonder myself whether blockchain could play a positive role there. So we see how these new emerging technologies could interact with each other.
Yeah, I mean, digital welfare isn't a new thing. You know, this is something that lots of different governments are exploring across the world. But at the same time, whilst it has a lot of benefits around bringing efficiency and lowering costs for the institution, the byproduct is marginalizing individuals who may not be familiar with those systems. If you use blockchain technology in the right way, it can be there to manage those risks that are coming from emerging technologies, that are integrated with our lives regardless.
And again, when we are talking about digital welfare, we have to know that humanity hasn't yet cleared enough what is, in purely simple old-fashioned economic terms, the welfare, what is being optimized, by whom it has to be optimized. So if we now delegate this question that we haven't formulated for ourselves as species, right, to a system that is yet not very clear to us and about to explain itself to us, and if we already know that ChatGPT, for instance, is very adamant to its opinion, even when it's wrong. Imagine questions about fairness, questions about health, or future new discoveries. So especially for social welfare, we don't know when we are fair. We don't know how to solve this problem. And trusting this question to a system that might as well mislead us big time is something that we cannot afford if we really care for the people in the end. It's a fantastic way to, raise your hands and say, well, the system decides. But if we don't want to be there, it needs a lot of test and trial.
Thank you, Annie. And maybe just a final question. What are the next steps for you in your work in terms of welfare, regionality, and emerging technology?
Well, I hope to keep monitoring the evolution of human reception of these novel technologies on the one side. In terms of my study and my research up to now has identified that people do appreciate human work much more than artificial intelligence-based one. But on the other side, there is work that's showing that while people like human work more, they do trust artificial work better. So this contrast and where it will lead us and what inequalities and discriminations it will create is a very interesting and exciting field of work for me. But what I hope to see is ideas like the one described by Chloe being implemented and to really try, but to try carefully by thinking deep rather than going fast with our prejudice in a good or bad way for the new tools in order to make sure we make the world a better place.
And Chloe, over to you. Could you tell us the next steps in your work on technology, sustainability, and emerging ideas?
I'm on a bit of a mission, really, to try and demonstrate the value that you can get from these technologies, to make it more accessible to the general public, to show that technologies like blockchain have a lot more to offer. We're in a time where we're seeing climate issues that are more and more pressing. So I personally feel strongly that we need to leverage these technologies, and actually those technologies that can be have a higher environmental impact, to demonstrate how we can use them to solve such issues and really demonstrate that utility.
Chloe, Annie, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.